What's up everybody, this is Zoya, the Russian Korean. And of course, on the days that I film, I always get something on my face. Seems that turning on the camera just triggers everything. It like works every single time, like a charm. But regardless, the long-awaited Arcane finally made its premiere last weekend. There were a number of ways in which Riot and Netflix and everybody really, I feel like there are so many sponsors and people who are like trying to have a piece of it that it almost tells you right away, even before you watch it, that they believe that this is good, that this is the thing that will really attract people, that this is what will capture their attention. Because the amount of marketing that went into it, the opening show that was pretty much all about Arcane. Like usually opening shows, right, they are about the artists, and yes, they were there. A lot of times they are also about like the previous World's Championships and what happened then and the teams that won from before, and then we kind of transition into what's happening now. They didn't really do that this time because the focus of it all was Arcane. And don't get me wrong, it was a great show. But the fact that they like invested into that so much and made it all about that, it just shows you that the real main character of the finals of Worlds 2021 was not EDG versus Damwon Kia. It was Arcane. The premiere that followed was also allowed to be co-streamed on Twitch for anyone who wished. Now, I unfortunately wasn't able to participate because every weekend I'm not home. So every time Riot decides to do something big over the weekend, I have to like postpone it until Monday. So anyway, the premiere happened. Everyone got super excited, super pumped. The first episode was allowed to be co-streamed. And then 2 other episodes, which are part of the first act, were also released on Netflix. And so the first 3 episodes, which they would call Act 1, are on Netflix now, so you can go watch it if you'd like. I watched those episodes as well. And so what I wanted to talk about in this video was just share my first impressions, also my certain observations that I made while watching, as well as any questions, just any random questions that could come up as I was watching the episodes. And so as a preface, I just want to say that, of course, this is going to be based on my personal opinion. I'm not trying to tell you guys what to think or how to interpret the show. You are free and more than welcome to share your comments in the comment section down below. Also, yes, there will be spoilers in this video because I will talk about certain plot points that happen. So if you don't want any spoilers, please just stop this video, go watch the 3 episodes, the first 3 episodes of Arcane, and then come back if you may, and see if you agree on the things that we will discuss here. But if you're not bothered by spoilers or you've already seen the show, then by all means proceed. And so before we dive into Arcane, I just want to say, if you enjoy this kind of content and you would like me to talk about Arcane in the future as more episodes come out, please do consider liking this video, sharing it with your friends, subscribing to the channel if you haven't already done so, and like I said earlier, commenting your thoughts in the comment section down below. And with that being said, let's talk about Arcane. So, Arcane, the first 3 episodes. Overall, they set the stage for what's going to happen in the rest of the show. It's when we get introduced to the characters of the show and also, you know, the trauma, the past, everything that we need to know in order to move on. One thing I can say right away, and that kind of popped out for me pretty much instantly, is that stylistically, this show is on point. The choice to combine, you know, CG and traditional animation together made sense to me stylistically and in terms of the story itself. It was not distracting and actually looked quite good. I would say that if you're not watching the show for the story, you will at least watch it just for the art. I think it's very well done. Yeah, I liked it right away. The intro, which is, you know, like about a minute or so of, you know, there's music and then you see, you know, some of the credits. For those of you guys who are anime appreciators, you probably also pay close attention to those as well, because a lot of the animes become iconic even through the intros and the endings. And so in this case, the introduction, there was no like special ending for each episode, but the introduction I think was pretty good too. The clay figures, the sculptures, the theme song, of course. I think personally that it can compete with any anime opening out there. I liked the minimalistic approach, as well as the kind of implication of molding everything together, the character modeling. And speaking of characters, the first episode basically introduces us to the main characters of the show. It gives us a glimpse into their life and who they are, as well as the main tensions between, you know, the 2 cities that are kind of in the background, but also the main subject of the whole conflict that's happening. So there are lots of characters that are introduced in the first episode, but I just wanted to bring attention to the three that are, in my mind, the three main characters. That's Vi, Powder, and Jace, and what kind of, in my own observation, unites them. So first, talking about Vi, the way she is presented, the way we see her, is that she's very strong, determined. She's the oldest in her peer group, kind of, so she is somebody that they look up to. And because of that, she tends to take a lot more risk and also to be a lot more hot-tempered. She definitely realizes that she has a responsibility, but at the same time, I guess there's also that part of her that wants to do something because she realizes that she's the one who acts first and then other people follow. We get a very good look at her character in the first scene, even when they are trying to commit a robbery. The way she interacts with her peers and how she takes on the role of a leader. And we also get to see kind of the other side of her when she is talking to Vander, who is like their father figure. Now, Vi and Powder, they're sisters, but they're orphaned, and we kind of get the glimpse into how that even came about, and then it gets explained a little bit more gradually as we get into the second and the third episode. But in the very beginning of the first episode, we get to understand how their parents died, and Vander, who is, like I said, the father figure, he kind of feels responsible for all that, so he takes these kids under his own wing and trying to protect them at this point. It's an interesting dynamic because Vander, on the one hand, feels responsible for the death of Vi's and Powder's parents, but at the same time, he takes on the role of their parents after that. And then he also kind of embodies that kind of a leader that Vi wants to be, but at the same time, there is something in him that changed a lot. I will not get into that into like great detail, but Vander feels like what he did in the past that resulted in the deaths of many people, including Vi and Powder's parents, was a mistake. It was his failure as a leader. And so now he's trying to lead Zon in a different way, not with fighting and fists, but more diplomatically. And Vi is kind of, because of her hot-temperedness and because all she knows basically is fighting and fists, she disapproves basically of Vander's leadership style. But moving on from Vi, let's talk about Powder. When we see Powder introduced, we realize that she's very shy. She's a lot younger than the peers that she's surrounded with. Really, the only reason why she's even with them is because she's Vi's sister. Otherwise, she's kind of like too young for their group. And so because of that, even though she comes with them and she does what they do, she still feels kind of insecure because she is among older kids. And because she's so much younger, she tends to make, you know, the biggest mistakes. And so because of that, one of the peers, he calls her a jinx. He says, well, when she comes with us, she just jinxes everything because she makes everything go badly. And because Powder wants to be part of this group, she wants to be acknowledged as somebody who is capable and can contribute. She takes those kinds of phrases extremely close to heart because as a kid, you know, she wants to belong. But at the same time, she realizes her shortcomings and that they tend to exclude her from her peers. Another aspect of her character that's worth noting is that unlike her sister, who is this leader, she is, because of her age, primarily, I think, but also her temperament, she is more of a follower. She doesn't seem to have much agency over what to do and how to act. And because of that, when they get into sticky situations or situations where you have to improvise or do something on your own, she tends to mess up. So this kind of theme of leader, follower, and also agency and insecurity, we really see it play out a lot in these first 3 episodes and eventually lead to something kind of really catastrophic at the end, which leads to the separation of the 2 sisters. But I won't get ahead of myself. Let's talk about Jace. The reason why I think Jace is the third of the 3 main characters in the show is because he kind of represents Piltover for us. He is the guy that we get the best look at in Piltover. And when we see him, we realize that he's an idealist. He has a dream and he wants to achieve it. And because of that, he's actually very single-minded, not narrow-minded, but just if he wants to accomplish something and he's trying to do everything, even conducting his experiments and everything without any permit, to try to achieve it. And that's what kind of gets him into trouble. But even though he does get into trouble and he kind of narrowly escapes a pretty harsh sentence of being kind of banished from Piltover, he still is very daring, and he continues with the encouragement of Victor, who kind of gets introduced to us in the second episode. Because of his idealistic single-mindedness, he decides that it's worth pursuing an even greater risk in trying to prove to the leaders of Piltover that he can contribute to society and that, yes, he has something worth looking into. And so we get these three characters, Vi, Powder, and Jace. They live in different worlds. Well, Vi and Powder, they live in the same world, but at the same time, their roles and their personalities are quite different from each other. But there's something that, in my personal opinion, kind of unites the three, and that is the feeling of powerlessness. In fact, power in this show, and really in any show that involves any kind of like global conflict or something like that, it plays an important role, and Arcane is really no exception to that. Silco, who is, as far as I can tell, the main villain, the antagonist of the show, he also talks about power and how you are not born with it. You don't have any special traits that involve power, but you do whatever you can to basically grab at it, and you are willing to stop at nothing to attain it. And so that's kind of from his evil perspective. But when it comes to Vi, Powder, and Jace, all three of them have some elements of their life that are kind of stifled by powerlessness. So Vi, even though she's this leader among her peers, and she is very strong, and she's a good fighter, she still feels powerless because under Vander's guidance and his kind of patronage, she feels like she can't really do anything because she's simply not allowed to kind of cross that line. She feels confused and she doesn't know how to deal with the situation that the people of Zaun are in terms of their relationship with the people overhead, kind of the Piltovan people. And so she's trying to look for guidance from Vander, but he kind of doesn't know what to do either. He's trying to negotiate something to be more diplomatic about it, but she feels like there's another way which involves force. But at the same time, she realizes the consequences of that, and so she can't, in the end, she can't really do anything. Powder's powerlessness is probably the most obvious of the three. She's the youngest, she messes up a lot, she makes mistakes, she doesn't have much say in what's happening, and the things that she does make on her own, which are these little kind of explosive bombs that she tries to create on her own, most of the time, like, they don't work. And so because of that, she also feels powerless and frustrated. Finally, Jace, of course, his powerlessness is a little bit more subtle. It's in the fact that he is not the right class. It's the fact that even though he has all these ambitions and thoughts and ideas, he is just kind of not high enough in terms of class to kind of convince other people that what he wants to do is worthwhile, worth pursuing. He's young, yes, but it's mainly his status as someone who doesn't come from any great family, not related to any of the counselors who are the kind of like the leaders of Piltover, and basically at the mercy of his patrons. So he can have the greatest ideas in the world, but if the patrons, if the people above don't approve, then he can't really do anything. And so as we get to know these three characters and realize that all three of them share something in common, which is this powerlessness in their own situation, it kind of sets you up for what to expect in the future, which is how are they going to choose to attain power if the opportunity presents itself? And if they do attain power in the end, are they going to use it for good or something else? So that's just something that I kind of observed as I was, watching the first 3 episodes and thinking about, what do these characters have in common? What is this theme that is developed here? And what should we or what can we expect in the future? But moving on to the second episode, here we really get to see more of the Piltover life, and this is where the story of Jace gets developed more. I already mentioned a few things about that, and I'm not really going to get into the details. The most important thing that we see is the escalating tensions between Piltover and Zaun. And the one thing that I liked seeing in the second episode is actually something that relates to just the lore of Piltover in general, stuff that is not in the show. But if you go on League's website and you go onto the universe page and you find Piltover and just read about the region, you kind of get a sense of this, and this is what I'm talking about. Piltover and Zaun are presented as these sister cities that are also complete opposites of each other, kind of, in terms of wealth, status, and quality of life, and everything else that associates with that. And so the way Piltovans try to present themselves or try to show their city, they try to make it look as happy and as advanced, developed, sophisticated as possible. And so things like depression, desperation, they're kind of just like not part of the Piltover vocabulary. They are reserved for Zaun. That's like what Zaun deals with. But Piltover, everything in Piltover is nice. That's kind of the impression that you get. But of course you realize that if people live there, it can't be true. And I think the second episode of Arcane really shows us that other side of Piltover, kind of the ugly side. It peaks at the scene where Jace is basically trying to commit suicide because he feels like he is in a situation where he's been completely stripped of all agency. The entire work of his life has been confiscated. He's been banished from the academy. He lost his patronage, cannot talk to his friends. And so he goes back to the apartment where kind of everything happened, and he takes off, the things that were precious to him that he was wearing on his wrist, and he's ready to jump. And that kind of moment really caught my attention because I knew about the lore of Piltover from before I even watched Arcane, and I was kind of wondering how they were going to present Piltover and what they were going to show about, the people that live there and what are their characters going to be like. Are they all just going to be happy-go-lucky and have sort of like first world problems or something like that? But they didn't choose to go that way, and I really like that. I like the fact that they showed how this social pressure, as well as a certain kind of a repression of individual pursuit and creativity, that stifles Jace as a person. And that leads me into another theme that is introduced in the second episode, and it relates actually to the title of the show, which is Arcane. Now, this word is introduced here as kind of referring to the magic powers that are out of the realm of science. The second episode starts with Jace and his memory from his childhood. He and his mother were in a dire situation, and somebody saved them. But when they saved them, they were using what appeared to be a Brackern crystal, which is what we see in all the hextech technology, and what we see Jace experiment with later. He becomes really fascinated with these crystals. He realizes that those crystals, they are basically magic. And so through his experiments, what he is trying to do is basically tap into the arcane, or the magic, through science to use for the good of people, to help people, to save lives. That is his dream. Now, in the second episode, during Jace's trial, when he mentions his dream of tapping into magic through science, one of the counselors, actually, she says, and I will quote, "Piltover was founded to escape the warmongering of mages, not cultivated." And that was an interesting bit of detail for me, because you don't get that from looking at the lore of Piltover. There seems to be no mention of this kind of implied fear of magic. Of course, it's obvious that they're all about science and pioneering these inventions, but there's never really, I never, at least I personally never got the impression that like they're supposed to be escaping something from magic or escaping magic itself. This is probably the only question that I have in terms of like the backstory is, well, why? What happened? Is this a Demacia type of situation where they're just repressing mages altogether, or is there something else? I would expect to see some sort of explanation or development later on in the series, but if they don't, then I would really kind of question this statement, or at least would want to know like why they say it, why they're so fearful of magic, which is quite prevalent in the world of Runeterra. Now, moving on, after Jace decides not to commit suicide, and he and Victor, they team up together. Not gonna get into details of that, but they successfully activate the hextech crystal. They show that they can stabilize it, that they can control it, and thereby that its use is safe. And apparently, I guess in the later parts of the series, we will get to see how hextech kind of became a core part of Piltover, which is what we know from lore itself. But that's also where the flip side of it is at, and those of us who already know about the lore of Piltover, we know that this idealistic dream of Jace's that is, using hextech for the good of people, to help them, to save lives, that is not going to be the primary use of hextech technology. In fact, it's quite far from that. I would encourage you to visit that part of the universe page where Piltover is, and just kind of check out their use of hextech technology if you haven't already done so, or if you don't know about it. So you will get to see that the way that they use it basically just solidifies even more this very hierarchical structure of the city. You see how ownership of hextech technology and crystals basically divides everybody into haves and have-nots, and also is used to enforce kind of control. And so even though the third episode kind of presents us with this hopeful, you know, idealistic future for Jace's dream, we can already tell that it's probably not going to be the case. And Heimerdinger kind of warns about it. And looks like this may be the danger that the new uses of hextech technology will bring, both to Piltover and also to its relationship with Zon. And that brings me to my kind of final observation, which is, you know, we're talking about the hextech crystals and the power that Jace and Victor kind of, they learn how to stabilize it, to control it. But Powder, who stole some of these crystals, and she realizes that they can be used to explode. She uses one of the crystals to create an explosion and try to help Vi and her friends and Vander as they are kind of trapped in this warehouse where Silco is holding them hostage. And I'm not going to get into details of how that even came about. But basically Silco, after concocting his own way of grabbing at power, both in Zon and also in Piltover. And he comes to the surface, he goes to Zon, and he actually takes Vander, lures in Vi and her friends into, basically into a trap. But as all this unfolds, Powder, she's not there. She was left at home. She was left behind, basically. She was left at home by Vi because she felt like Powder was not ready. Powder is too young. And this mission is just like way too dangerous. And so Powder is left at home very confused and frustrated. We can see it from her kind of throwing this tantrum. There's this fit of rage because at the same time she's so sad also at the fact that she's been left behind, that she's been deemed kind of unworthy of this task. And so what she does is, as she realizes that those crystals can be used for explosions, she creates a bomb. And she makes her way to the place where everything is going down, and she tries to help. Which is interesting because that's exactly what Jace's intention was, to use this like to help people. But he never gets to see the result of what happens from this explosion. But those consequences are extremely tragic. Powder's interference and use of the crystal results in the deaths of many people, including her friends and eventually Vander. And this to me actually answered a lot of questions because, you know, when we were seeing the trailers and the different teasers, previews, we saw that something happened to Jinx. Something she must have done that was so bad that she kind of went off the deep end. But I just couldn't think of anything that would like set her off that hard. For example, you know, is it her relationship with Vi? Well, from what we saw, you know, in those 3 episodes, it really wouldn't be enough to explain the change, the reason why she would be too far gone in the future. But this scene with the hextech crystal and how it explodes and kills a bunch of people, including those who she loves the most, it really explains the weight of guilt and probably responsibility that we have already gotten a glimpse of in the different previews and teasers. She wanted to help. She didn't mean to make it worse, but that's exactly what happened. And so in the end, we see that Powder is being taken up by Silco because she believes that at this point Vi left her and she is beyond redemption. So from this closing scene in the 3rd episode, we can kind of predict that she's probably joining, you know, dark side. And it's going to be interesting to see how she would either be brought back or, you know, whether she will ever reconcile with Vi, but also whether she would ever reconcile with herself. Overall, I think so far, the show's great. I love the complexity of the characters, the tension, the conflicts that are happening, not just in the world that they live in, but also within themselves. The unifying themes that you can track both through the characters, how they are presented, and also through the events that are happening around them. And the suspense that it builds and making us wonder what is going to happen in the future. So anyways, these were just my thoughts, my rambling thoughts on the first 3 episodes of Arcane. What did you guys think? How did you like the first act? Was there something that stuck out to you? Something that was either interesting or maybe made you kind of, question something? Which characters did you like the best? What are you most looking forward to in the future episodes? Let me know in the comment section below. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. This was Zoya, the Russian Korean. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.